It's a relief to say that after what has felt like a really long off-season, the Overwatch League 2020 season has finally begun, with the opening matches being played over this past weekend in New York and Dallas. Today I want to briefly go over the 8 matches that took place before giving my overall thoughts on the opening weekend as a whole. Saturday kicked off in New York with the intriguing matchup between the Toronto Defiant and the Paris Eternal, with both teams heading into the new season with very changed lineups. Of course, we already knew that with Hanbin and Sparkle ineligible for the time being, this was a Paris squad not yet at full strength. They surprised many of us out the gate by fielding a starting 6 with their 2 main tanks, whilst their off-tank Smex and DPS star Soon were left on the bench. This set up a very interesting tank duel between Beast and Nevix on the side of the Defiant, against Bembest and No Smite of the Eternal. Early on, the Toronto side of this equation looked to be struggling a bit, with Beast often getting caught out ahead of his team. But in his defence, this was probably partly down to early nerves, but also more importantly because of the very clever Symmetra strategy that was employed by Paris' Exi. With their 2 main tanks on Ryan and Orisa, whilst Exi was on Sim alongside Nico on Mei, the Eternal employed a sort of divide and conquer tactic on the opening map Lijiang, using their many shields and walls to split up and isolate the members of Defiant. It was quite clear, and Shawful would admit as much later, that Toronto was unpracticed playing against this sort of matchup, and the team struggled on both rounds of control to really get any momentum, with their best opportunity being snuffed out by a cheeky teleport backcap, which avoided a nano-boosted Death Blossom from Logix. As such, Paris would go on to take map 1 2-0. From here on out, Shawful would be subbed in for the Defiant, and it was with his introduction on stage that really saw Toronto start to find their mojo. It wasn't an easy task for them though. The Eternal continued to put up quite a tough challenge, with Exi popping off on McCree, whilst FC God was a silent hero on the backline, and a quick mention of Nico also, who performed far better than most anticipated ahead of the season. But despite both Eichenwald and Horizon playing out closely, in the end the teamwork of the Defiant was now just giving them the edge. B started to look a lot more comfortable, making some nice plays and hitting some big shatters on Reinhardt, whilst Nevix began doing an excellent job of shepherding Exi and keeping him more and more contained as the series went on. This was all the while the DPS line started to slowly but surely tip the fights more and more in their favour. This would be emphasised on Havana after Toronto had taken a 2-1 lead, with Logic shutting down Exi entirely, and with him out of the equation, all of Paris' threat disappeared, leading to the most one-sided map of the series that gave it to Defiant the victory by a score of 3-1. As said, both sides could take plenty of positives from this series. Toronto have gotten off to a great start of the season, with their team as a whole working really well together and improving as the match went on. The Eternal meanwhile looked really competitive throughout, despite still not being at their full strength, which bodes well for the rest of the season, especially if Exi and FD God can continue with these high level performances, but more on that later. Following this series came the match the hometown crowd were waiting for, as the New York Excelsior went up against the London Spitfire. I'll be bringing this point up later, but I do have to mention how great the New York crowd was this weekend. They had great enthusiasm and high energy on both days, even adding to the matches that didn't involve the Excelsior as well, although for this one especially, they certainly brought some noise. Early on, however, it was the youthful rookies of London who looked more settled, punishing what was quite a shaky start from New York, with players like Mano getting caught out from going in too aggressively. Glister was expectedly impressive, but I personally feel that it was his DPS partner Babylon May who really stood out, as well as Bernard who had a fantastic display on D.Va, causing chaos in the Excelsior backline. To the surprise of many, London were gone to take map 1 on Lijiang 2-0, but from here on, the series progressed in an almost identical manner to the one before it, with maps 2 and 3 being closely contested, before New York dominated on the final map to win the series 3-1. Like Toronto, the Excelsior really grew into the series as it progressed, with players like Huayu, Mano and Jonak all starting to show their star talent. But without question, their star player in this series was their new man Hopper. He came up clutch in a very tight map 2 on King's Row, with a number of impactful D.Va bombs, whilst being a standout player for the rest of the series. This win for New York showed that they're still a top quality team, especially by the end once they had found their rhythm and got some momentum. But for London, even in defeat there were still plenty of positives, with their talent despite still being raw and inexperienced, showing they have quality and potential to be a good team this year with some further development. This concluded the New York homestand on Saturday, so it was now time to head to Dallas, with the first match there seeing the LA Gladiators play the Vancouver Titans. This match had plenty of talking points leading into it, but a new one emerged at the start of this series as LH Cloudy featured in the starting main tank position over OGE. Whilst his play was somewhat hit or miss, with some shaky moments being mixed in with some massive shatters, the Gladiators as a whole looked good early on, particularly in regards to their team play, with Birdering looking solid, while supported excellently by the support line of Big Moose and Shaz. Vancouver meanwhile looked strong themselves, but perhaps more on an individual level when it came to the opening map Nepal, with Fisher looking a bit uncoordinated with the rest of his team. It would be this difference that gave the Gladiators a slight advantage, and thus saw them take this opening map 2-1. Unlike the other matches on Saturday though, this one would progress much more evenly, with the teams trading blows back and forth. Vancouver gathered some momentum on King's Row to level the series, and then unleashed a nanoblade combo of Haxor and Ryu Jae-hong on Hanamura, resulting in the most one-sided map of this series, which included a disgusting 6k from Haxor. Map 4 would see impressive displays from the reinforcements of OGE and Mirror make the difference, as the Gladiators tied up the series at 2-2, but this would be in vain, as the Titans took Lijiang to win the series 3-2 in our first 2020 Game 5. Whilst not a perfect display, Vancouver still undoubtedly looked like a very strong team, even if they were still looking to work on their coordination with Fisher, who himself had an okay match. But with Haxall looking super strong, it was the start they would have been looking for. As for the Gladiators, I would have to emphasise again how impressed I was with Birdring, who looked a lot more like his former self, and not at all the liability many including myself worried he might have been. The team's coordination and teamwork looked very promising, although it was surprising to see LH Cloudy play 4 out of the 5 maps. He looked solid, but especially by the end he was getting caught out for playing a little too over-aggressively, and I wonder had OGE continued after map 4 whether the outcome might have changed. Although that aside, playing a top team this closely at the start of the season is certainly something both the team and their fans should be pleased with. To conclude Saturday, we got to see a very entertaining series between the LA Valiant and the Dallas Fuel, who were in front of their home fans. Dallas started really well, taking the control map on the back of an excellent performance from both Decay and Doha on the DPS line, but like all the other teams before them, this win on control would prove to be a bit of a curse for the rest of the series. Decay was fantastic on the Fuel for the rest of the match, but from this point onwards, it was the Valiant who burst into life, with the DPS duo of KSF and KSP starting to pop off, whilst McGravy got into the action with one of the plays of the week on Blizzard World, where a Diva bomb of his led to a 6k. It by no means became a stomp, with Dallas keeping the next 3 maps quite close and competitive, but the Valiant just seemed to win the fights they needed to in the clutch moments, especially behind KSP, who had an amazing debut, particularly on McCree, and after defeating Decay in a great duel on Junkertown, LA locked up the series 3-1. For Dallas and their fans, it was disappointing to start the season at home with a loss. Decay was outstanding, but he definitely needed more help around him. Doha showed his potential, but the split time between Note and Trill at the second tank position looks like it could have been a bit of a problem, with the Fuel at times uncertain as to whether they should run double shield or run Diva. The Valiant though couldn't have made a much better start to their season, cashing in on the Scrimbucks and proving they're a much better side than most expected. Gig is probably the only major question mark, as the man is clearly way too over-aggressive on Rhine, but in turn, this creates so much space for his team to pop off, so it's kind of a high risk, high reward strategy for now. Around him, KSP was nutty on the day as I previously mentioned, but I want to give special mention to Rain as well, who I thought was brilliant at the main support position, particularly at getting into the backline and finishing off kills, whilst also causing disruption, so things looked incredibly bright for this promising roster after day 1. After such a competitive and entertaining opening day of action, it wasn't too surprising to see Sunday become a little more one-sided, especially in regard to the match scores, with almost every series ending 3-0, with just one exception. The first of these opened the day as the London Spitfire played the Paris Eternal. This is where the raw inexperience of his London squad clearly came back to bite them, as they came out short against another impressive showing from Paris. Nose White again looked good on the tank line, but like the day before, it was FD God and Exy who stole the show, with the pair again producing some great displays to propel Paris to a 3-0 victory. There were some bright spots for London, with Bernard and the DPS line again looking alright, but after watching both of their matches now, my biggest concern lies at their arguably most experienced position, support. But with this being so early into the season, I'm not going to get too critical at what is still clearly a work in progress Spitfire side. But New York homestand ended with the home team taking on the Boston Uprising. I don't think I need to spend too much time here at all, as it went pretty much exactly how you'd have predicted it. The Excelsior looked really strong, building upon the momentum they had gathered from the day before, to solidify their position near the top of the pack with a comfortable 3-0 victory. That's not to say there weren't some good things shown by Boston though, with Carla Hex making some nice plays, but until they've played someone of a similar level, it's kind of hard to tell where they're at, and this fixture almost couldn't have been a more difficult one for them to start on. Returning to Dallas, Day 2 kicked off with the Valiant versus the Titans in another entertaining affair. KSP again highlighted his quality, but it was clear from the outset that despite putting up an impressive effort as a team, Vancouver simply had more quality within their lineup, which saw them convert the third 3-0 of the day. It was certainly a series both sides could be happy with, as they built upon their strong opening day victories, but for the Titans especially, it really felt like much more of a team performance, with Fisher looking a lot more in sync with his teammates. Of course it helped when Haxall and Twilight were playing insane, but if this strong start for the Titans continues over the next few weeks, then in all likelihood they will find themselves in a good spot to challenge again for this year. To conclude the opening weekend though, the San Francisco Shock would play the hometown Dallas Fuel. With all the sweeps throughout the rest of the day, it was almost expected that the Shock themselves would also brush the Fuel aside 3-0, but this would be far from reality. Interestingly, it was Architects, not Violet, starting at flex support, but regardless, San Francisco entered Oasis with purpose and convincingly took the opening round. From here though, things started to get a bit trickier for them. Decay and Doha started to pick up kills while the rest of the team around them remained firm. Dallas would win the following round, before then gaining all the momentum in the final round of control as they reached 99%, 1% away from victory. They even got themselves into a 6v4 fight, but this is where the Shock demonstrated why they were champions, with Striker, Sinatra and Architect incredibly clutching and seeing the Shock through to win the map from the clutches of defeat. Eichenwald would stay on script, with San Francisco comfortably taking the win here to double their lead, but this impressive display from Dallas was about to go to the next level on Horizon. First on defence behind Decay's Widow and Doha's Junkrat, the Shock struggled to get anything going, and when they finally looked to be taking the points in overtime, a clutch streak by Decay on Tracer halted them completely in their tracks. The Fuel's own attack struggled to move a bit as well, with Striker clicking heads on McCree, but eventually their defence cracked, allowing Dallas to come through and take a map no one would have expected. Map 4 returned to normality, with the Shock dominating to confirm the 3-1 win, and at this point I should probably take a moment to praise Architect and his performance on Ana throughout the series. For a guy not even playing his primary role, he was incredible, hitting sleep dart after sleep dart that really helped San Francisco to stifle any momentum the Fuel looked to be getting. It did seem like the Shock were perhaps a little rusty in moments, but it's clear they're still a top team and should be challenging come the end of the season. That said, take nothing away from Dallas' performance in this series that was so much better than the day before in terms of a whole team perspective. Closer in Crimzo looked much more comfortable and the tank line seemed much more assured with what they were doing. Still, I do worry that Decay is turning into Effect 2.0 with how well he's playing, but considering the improvements made by the Fuel over the weekend, I feel cautiously optimistic that this won't be a repeat and Decay's carry performances will receive more assistance over the next few weeks. With all the matches now covered, let's quickly look at how I got on in regards to my predictions for the opening weekend. This is what I had predicted ahead of the matches, so we can see that whilst on Saturday I had mixed success, only getting 2 of the results right. Sunday ended up being a lot more successful, as I went a perfect 4 from 4, taking my week 1 record to 6 out of 8, which I'll happily take given the unknowns and uncertainty surrounding many of the teams. For those that are wondering, this is what the current standings look like, although obviously they mean pretty much nothing just after 1 week of matches, which didn't even see all the teams play, but it's still something we'll be keeping an eye on as the weeks go by. As a last point though, I just want to make a couple of observations about the opening weekend as a whole. Personally, I thought the homestand model got off to an excellent start, with both New York and Dallas crowds really adding to the event with a great atmosphere, although it has to be said, the New York crowd from my perspective were the better of the two. Probably the biggest issue of the opening weekend was the broadcast production. Pretty much anything that could go wrong, did go wrong, and while some of the memes were great, this is definitely something that needs to be avoided as the season progresses. I'd also like to hear a comment on the Chinese homestand as well, sooner rather than later. That said, the analyst desk and casting I thought was entertaining, with the new talent members having strong debuts. And the meta before hero pools comes into effect seems to be in a good place, with the players utilising a variety of fun heroes across the roles, and I hope this continues, as it should lead to a great season ahead for us. But on that note, we've reached the end of my Overwatch League 2020 Week 1 review, and if you have reached the end of the video, then I'd like to thank you for watching. Tomorrow I'll be back with my Week 1 power rankings after the matches this weekend, so if you don't want to miss out, then please consider liking, subscribing, and follow me on my Twitter or at my Discord so you don't miss out on this continuing Overwatch League content. But until next time, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.